Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host, as always, Stan McCune, realtor here in the Greenville area. You can find all of my contact information in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs. And please, if you like the show, please subscribe, rate, review, like, whatever. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, whatever. Please, however those platforms allow you to interact, that's all I ask, is that you do that, like, review, subscribe, and that you use me as your realtor at some point, hopefully in your lifetime here in Greenville. Today, I'm very excited to have a real estate investor in the Greenville area on the show to have a great conversation. This has been in the works for a little bit. It's been in the works for a minute. And a lot of that is just it's just my fault. I've just been so busy. But I have Willie Coleman here on the show. Willie is maybe started in real estate investing younger than anyone else in Greenville. I don't know anyone else that started earlier. He started at the age of 15 and is now still very young, 22 years old, which blows my mind because I've been I've known Willie since pre-pandemic for sure. So you would have been, like a teenager when we first met, but I didn't know that.
Right.
You held yourself a lot, to a much higher standard than a standard 17, 18-year-old. But Willie, before I let Willie, have the mic, as it were, I just want to say that he really knows real estate. When you're working with other real estate investors, and me as both an agent and an investor, it becomes apparent pretty quickly if people actually know what they're doing. And it became very quickly that Willie does know what he's doing. Despite his smile and charm, he's a pretty ruthless negotiator as well, I'll say. But whether flipping houses, building new construction, owning Airbnb properties, wholesaling, whatever, game respects game, Willie has done it all. And so yeah, Willie, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Man, Stan, well, first off, thank you for having me. I'm pumped to be here. We got to keep doing these Greenville podcasts. It's like we got everything else growing, so let's grow this side too. So I'm excited to keep it in the city if you'd have it. And
yeah,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, Willie. For those of you that don't know, Willie was recently on the Cash Compound podcast with local legend Jay Do. I don't know Jay Do super well, but we overlapped at college, and so he did a lot for Bob Jones University when he was there. He's done a lot for the city of Greenville as well. Great. I mean, I don't know how much hype stuff he's doing, but he's like the ultimate hype man to me. Like, sorry, what was that?
No, yeah, you're right. I mean, he's like Greenville's mascot at this point, right?
Yeah. Just when I hear his voice, I just get hyped. It doesn't matter what he's talking about.
Yep.
But on that show, if you guys want to listen to the Cash Compound, he and Willie had a great conversation where Willie goes into a lot of more detail than what we're going to cover in this episode as to how he got into real estate investing. That being said, I don't want people to be kind of flying blind as they're hearing this. So if you could give us kind of a Reader's Digest version of how you got into real estate investing at a young age and kind of what that looked like.
Absolutely. So, long story short, I was always the kid that never really fit into the crowd. You know, I grew up as a homeschooled kid. My parents are in the military. So kind of been all over the world. My brother was born in Japan. I ended up being born in New Mexico, blah, blah, blah. And when it comes to real estate, how I kind of got into this field, like I said, I was homeschooled. And at the age of probably, I want to say 13 years old, my parents ended up getting into a partnership with real estate investors. At the time, my mom, has a really good design eye. My dad used to build houses back home in Alabama. And they were really just trying to figure out what was next in their life. And they said, you know what? They saw HGTV. Let's try to flip a house. So they ended up doing a partnership. Well, me being homeschooled, after I was doing my work, my mom was like, hey, look, you're going to get to work. So lovingly, right?
Of course.
not forced anything, but so I decided to go to work with my parents. And after I was done with school, every pretty much every other day, when they would buy a house, I'd be the guy to do their landscape, their demolition. I would also take it like most of these properties that they're buying, um, they are not the best looking properties, but there's some things you can salvage. So I would literally salvage like any of the appliances in these properties, any of the cabinetry. I would salvage the toiletry work, and I'd take this stuff out carefully instead of just knocking it out. I'd take it out carefully. And at
If
13,
my
14
if
years
my
old,
contractor is listening to us, listen carefully, buddy. No,
listen carefully.
I'm just kidding.
This is a way to increase your revenue.
That's right.
But I would literally just put this stuff on offer up on Craigslist, and I kid you not. I mean, at 13, 14 years old, on top of what my parents are paying me to do demolition and landscape, I'm making probably $2,000 to $3,000 a month just from selling old appliances and cabinetry, and just whatever made sense I could sell. I mean, I remember listening to like a purple tub one time, just random stuff. I mean, you'd be surprised what people will buy from you. And so
I've had some experience with Facebook Marketplace, so I don't know if I could be surprised at this point.
Yeah, there are very few now, but yeah, man. I mean, so I just always kind of have that entrepreneur mindset of like, look, you don't have to go the traditional route. There's opportunity in everything you look at, and so I would do this stuff for my parents. Fast forward a few years, going throughout the time, still doing demolition, landscape, and then I would evolve. So I started doing electrical, plumbing, roofing. I mean, I literally can build a house. I know the process, and I've done many parts of the process to make it happen. And so as we go along that process, I'm 15 at the time. They take me along. They bring me to a KREA meeting or a REIA meeting. In our area, it's called KREA. And go to this meeting. I hear the concept of wholesaling real estate, and my ears kind of peak because these people are talking about the concept of finding a discounted property, getting it under contract, not needing per se cash to close on it, and just assigning your rights to that contract to the end buyer. So in other words, in my head, I'm like, I'm pretty good at like finding something that's not that great and then finding somebody that wants it. One man's trash is another man's treasure type of thing. And, being the entrepreneur mindset of, figuring stuff out, right? A lot of times, you hear a concept and it's such a big concept. It's like, we get all these things in our head. And let me hit on that in a second. Let me slow down a little bit. But anyway, basically learn the concept of wholesaling. I started at LSU with my brother because you can't buy a house at 15 years old or sign a contract for one. So I started at LSU with my brother. He was, I think, 19 or 20 at the time. And both went on the LLC. And I basically just started, doing the work. The people at this meeting were saying how you can find houses. You can find them through sending letters and bandit signs and cold calling, all this stuff. And I picked a strategy and I said, hey, I can do this. I can talk to somebody. And so I started cold calling people. And at the age of 15, I ended up doing my first deal. We made a stupid amount of money. And by the time I was 15 to 18 years old, I think I wholesaled probably 60 to 70 properties, something like that. Yep. And was like, you know what? This is it. I'm not going to college. This is it. This is what I'm doing. Started buying and all types of other crazy stuff I'm sure we're going to get into here in a minute. And that's kind of how I started, and by just doing the work.
I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I actually got in as a wholesaler as well originally, but I hated wholesaling. Like the way you were describing that it utilized your skill sets, it was the opposite for me. It was like, no, this is not utilizing my skill sets well. I'm not a cold caller. I'm not that type of person. So that's why I've kind of found my spot in the retail side of things.
Wow. Yeah.
But what was that like getting into it from a really young age? I mean, did you actually enjoy the work, or did you just enjoy the money? Were there times you resented it? What was that like? Just, those teenage years.
Yeah. Good question, man. I feel like this. I feel like at the time, did I enjoy the work? I just was addicted to the hustle. I was addicted to making it happen. Growing up as a homeschool kid, I didn't have the distractions. I didn't have, whether that may be, going to a party or going to, getting into relationships or whatever that might be, they weren't there for me. So all it was in my life was, schoolwork. And outside of that, it's like, what's my hobby? What do you do in your free time? And, whether it's my parents being in the military or exactly where it comes from, there's something in me that I don't want to do anything halfway, and I don't want to not use my God-given gift. And I feel like, at that time, what I saw my God-given gift was just the ability to just make stuff happen. And whether that was me being the guy to physically swing the hammer to take the cabinets down, or planting bushes or whatever, I did have some sort of satisfaction in that. But of course, the reward of making money was great. And being able to make money at such a young age, to me, that was a God-given talent, and of course,
Absolutely.
Like anybody, I mean, I was not, I did not enjoy doing that work by any means for the majority of the time, but I did enjoy the results and learning how to work smarter. So again, starting as a demo guy, then evolving and saying, hey, why am I destroying these cabinets? Why won't I salvage these and make some money on them? So I think I like the process and how I was evolving. I think that's what I kind of fell in love with was just evolving, and how do I start working smarter here and not just working harder to make more. And so I love that process, and the transition from working with my parents and doing their properties to actually becoming a full-time wholesaler, going on to buying properties, et cetera. The pathway, I think that's continued in my life even today, is just loving getting better and evolving and really creating something. And so I love the work. Do I love it every day? No, but I do love the end in mind. And the end in mind is whatever the goal is at the time. So again, if it's wholesaling a property, it's solving a problem for that seller. And then it's, of course, getting an assignment fee. So I start there, and everything else in between, that's going to a property 15 times. That's, oh, you go under contract, it fell through, and da-da-da-da-da. That's the process. And so honestly, I don't, even to this day, I do not love what I do. But I do love the end in mind, which is one day this thing is running on, the goal is autopilot. True business to me is something that runs with you or without you. And that's what drives me every day. And God's given me the ability to be able to talk to people and the ability to put the pieces together. And so I love the process. Do I love every part of the process? No. And anybody that says they do, they're probably fluffing a little bit.
I know a lot of real estate investors, and they get bloodied in this business. Like it can chew you up and spit you out if you're not careful.
The ability to eat crap 6 days a week, and maybe the ability to eat caviar the 7th is what we're going for. But to keep going for 30, 40, 50 days at a time and just keep waiting for that caviar day, that's the thing, man.
That's right. So have you ever come close to burnout, do you feel like?
Oh yeah. I think I'm actually in the process, of reading a book called The Gap in the Game by Dan Sullivan. And that book really goes into detail of how we psychologically need to approach life in general, but also business in terms of, burnout, right? Burnout, or, enjoying the process, right? So although, we all know the end result, whether that's to get the deal closed, get the assignment fee, whatever the end result is, we know we're striving for that. But you got to enjoy the process too. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. And so for me, I'm still, I don't have it all figured out. I'm still kind of figuring out the day to day of what's keeping you, showing up every day to find the next deal, or et cetera, et cetera. And I'm still, definitely looking for whether you call it purpose or whether you call it whatever, definitely looking for it. But the reality is I always think about the alternative, right? And I say, well, what's the alternative? For me, right, I went to high school, didn't go to college, didn't have anything of the traditional sense of a pathway or a fallback per se, right? Like, hey, if this doesn't work out, I'll just go X, Y, and Z. No, for me, it's like, if this doesn't work out, I'm starting at literally 0, 0, 0.
Yeah.
And so for me, what sort of motivates me a lot is like, well, just think about oh my God, if all this was going tomorrow, okay, how would that make you feel? Or if just simple things, right? Power, electric, Wi-Fi, just being thankful for what we have, that really gets me juiced up, and it's just
for
like,
sure.
People don't really, in America especially, we take for granted just the basic necessities. And so I'm a big foodie, right? I like to eat. The reality is I don't do much, but I'm driven by eating good and traveling. And so, I've got to be able to eat sushi at least, a couple times a week. So it's like, all right, that motivates me. but yeah, man, it's interesting. It's like starting with the thought process of, I'm just gonna be gone tomorrow. So let's make sure we secure this and still have it. So let's keep going. That's kind of what's in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I was pretty busy. I was actually homeschooled through 7th grade, but then after that, I went to a Christian school. I stayed busy. I played a lot of sports. I started working before anyone else in my class did, about the same age that you did, except I started in the restaurant business, making like minimum wage. Eventually, by the end of my time in high school, I was kind of in a managerial role, but I was working like 60 hours a week during 60, 70 hours a week during the summer. And I might make, again, back then I might make $700 or $800 in a week, working that much. So I'm curious if you don't mind sharing, like, what were you bankrolling back then and those high school years?
I mean, dude, I was probably doing, again, 2,000 to 3,000 a month. 14, 15 years old. Yeah.
That's amazing. By the end of high school, what was that up to? By the time you're like 17, 18?
Yeah, by the end of high school, I mean, our company was making, and again, the wholesaling company at the time, we hadn't started acquiring properties or anything like that. I mean, I think we did, when I was 17, we did over 700K in revenue that year.
Amazing.
And again, that's why I'm like, going to college.
Yeah. You're not gonna get a better education than that.
Yeah, dude, you're gonna lose money if you go to college. So I was like,
okay. Yeah. In comparison to that, absolutely. Now, what did your friends think? I mean, I know that you said you didn't have a lot of friends, which I think you were probably downplaying things because I was homeschooled. I it's not the same, obviously, but you have some friends. So I mean, what did they?
So I ended up playing golf and I played sports and stuff for a local high school, and of course, yeah, you got. So I'll put it this way: I have acquaintances, right? I have people I know. A friend, I have my mother. But the reality is, I think we're on a whole different wavelength, right? You're talking to guys that are worried about, oh yeah, like we're going to this party, or we're doing this, or like we're trying to play it out, like whatever. It's like we're not even on the same thought process, right? So the conversation honestly wasn't even had. Like if I talk about, like I'm working with the seller right now, and we're figuring out how to make sure he doesn't go into foreclosure and on the 18th and this and that, like it's just like the conversation wasn't even had. It's the reality. They knew, from their perspective, it was like, oh yeah, Willie works with his parents in real estate and blah, 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 blah. And I've never been the guy to kind of boast, right? Like I've never been, hey, look at me, look what I'm doing. Because the reality is, one, I just I didn't care to tell you what I was working, nor did I need validation or anything like that. And I knew, one, these kids at the time we're not even on the same wavelength. So I just really didn't talk about it with them. It was just more so, you're working a lot and you see me whenever we're doing what we're doing. So again, at the time, it was like, hey, we're going to play golf or we're going to go run cross country. That's when I saw him. And so literally when I say, it wasn't like, oh, I didn't have friends because like I, socially awkward or whatever one might think of a, homeschooled person. It was more or less, that was my choice of why would I hang around the guy that's thinking about, whatever he's thinking about, something completely pointless, in my eyes. Right, Call of Duty, right? Or should I go, talk to guys like Stan about, hey, do you want to go buy this deal in Nicholtown, right? Like, that's what I want, you know? And so the reality was...
You didn't have a lot of common ground with your peers, basically.
Exactly. Didn't have common ground, and I also didn't want it. I didn't want the influence. I didn't want the influence of what, because again, whether it's spending time at a movie or spending time of anything that was outside of my goal at the time was just finding the next deal, talking to buyers, talking to sellers. Anything outside of that, besides in my immediate family, it didn't matter to me. It really didn't. And so, like I said, I did play golf and things like that, which I'm so glad I did because that skill has been able to translate into, doing things I'm doing now with raising money and, all types of stuff in our game of real estate. But the reality is, I really avoided anybody that was not going to get me closer to my goal at the time, which was finding the next deal.
Interesting. So
yeah,
did your peers, did they think you were crazy? Were they jealous? Were they just completely oblivious?
Honestly, probably oblivious. I mean, I don't, and at the time too, it's not like I was spending my money, right? Again, I separate things, right? So it's the company's making this money and it's just going right back into the company. So it's just, this is to build the company, right back into it. So I'm still, again, doing my thing. And again, they really probably just thought I was just working with my parents. Like, oh, he's doing construction or whatever.
Sure.
Okay. Like, yeah, like whatever, this kid. And so, I think probably from that time, I think I have one contact from those high school days of a guy I just play golf with now. And it's kind of funny because he ended up going to Clemson and he's actually my architect now. So again, so we ended up kind of coming back, but again, it's still in my world, right? It's like, again, I follow philosophy and I didn't do this at the time, but looking back, it really is. It's like the concept of doing just one thing. I call it job, because in this world, we've got all these things we can be doing. We could, you get a text right now. Hey, do you want to go to downtown? Do you want to whatever? And it's like, at the end of the day, I was jotting. I was just doing one thing. I was focused. And I think people really in this world need to focus. Everything works, or many things work, not everything. I should say many things work, whether it's from a marketing strategy, whether that's from a strategy of, performing in real estate, right? What about wholesaling? What about subject to? What about becoming a realtor? It all works, but you got to focus. You have to focus and master it. You can't do all of it. And if you do, you try to do all this, you're going to get distracted. So you got to focus, you got to dial in and go all in. And so that's what I was doing. But that's what I still believe. We're doing other strategies now, but it's like I mastered wholesaling, finding the deal. And guess what? Mastering finding the deal, that allows you to branch off to many other things. But at the end of the day, if you find a good deal, that's the first step. And I think a lot of times
it's the hardest step.
Yeah, it's the hardest step. It's like we got to start. We got to do it.
So, with you being homeschooled and all of that, like, did your parents see that you were gifted in this, and did they kind of meld your education around that, or did those kind of worlds not intertwine?
Yeah. So again, like at that time, I mean, they were just getting started in their real estate career as well, and I was again basically with them along the journey. And I think my parents, they've always been supportive. Whatever we decide to do, whether that is, again, I do have two other siblings, two brothers. One of my brothers, he's in the tech space. He ended up starting his company at like 18 years old. My other brother, he's a streamer. He's a Twitch streamer. And whatever we've done, they've always been supportive. And whatever we want to do, they've always been there to have our backs, whether that's emotionally or, they've never been the parents that, hey, like we don't come from, money, right? So they've never been able to give us checks or anything like that per se. But yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, like I said, when they started is when I started. So the reality is, as they were learning and becoming real estate investors, or again, they were just flippers, is when I got into it. So it was a really beautiful thing. And as I evolved as a wholesaler, again, I even ended up, not a lot. Again, they were definitely not my biggest buyer, but I would sell them deals. Of course, I'd cherry pick the best deals, sell them to them. And then eventually, again, I just started just building a true business by myself. But the reality is, I think it was really good for me to start when they started. Because again, I was kind of learning things along the way. To answer your question of, was there special education? No, not necessarily. But they did provide the opportunity for us, right? Again, they put us in the room. So again, at that age of, I guess I was 15, my brother was, 17, 18 at the time. They brought us along. So whatever they were doing, they would always have us around. because they were never like, hey, this is what you're going to do. You know, some parents are like, you're good at math, you're going to be an accountant, you're good at this, and you're going to go to this accounting school, whatever. No. So it was really beautiful to have the ability to choose, right? It's like they would say, hey, this is what you can do, this is what we do, and y'all go pick what you want to do. But they were always, hey, provided the opportunity. So again, so thankful for my parents. Again, they did not teach me all the ins and outs of what I'm doing today, but they did provide the opportunity to get us in the room. Yep. And get us whatever exposure that may be. Again, whether that was, hey, you want to go pursue a career in golf? All right, we're here for you. We'll take you whatever tournament, whatever. So they were there for that. And they've always been great to get us in the room, wherever that might be.
Yeah, that's great. Now, one thing I'm trying to picture is like a 15-year-old, like wholesaling, like talking to these old crusty investors. Like, did you ever feel like disrespected by the real estate community because of your age or anything like that, or were you able to just kind of like fit right in and people didn't even care?
All the time, man. I mean, even to this day, I mean, people will discount you. I mean, to this day now, I mean, I've got a lot of results. I've always been a results-driven person and kind of let results speak for themselves. But the reality is, I mean, whether it's age, race, class, people always judge you, right? And we can't control what people think. We can't. I can't sit in front of you and try to pitch you and say, Stan, look at me, I'm so great. No, I'm good at talking to yourself. No. Like, it's like, no, you can't do that.
Your body of work speaks for itself at the end of the day.
The reality is the work speaks for itself. It's like results speak. So if I come to you and say, hey, I have this deal, or hey, I've done this deal, check it out. We bought 123 Main Street, check it out. Here it is. I've always been a very visual results person. And so, for example, with wholesaling, when I'm in those rooms, I'm not ignorant to the fact of my youth, race, class, whatever you want to call it. I'm not ignorant to the fact. I'm not ignorant to the fact that I will be judged one way or another. And so when it comes to buyers, leading with, I would always, again, the Gary Vee model or whatever you want to call it, it's like lead with value. So, for example, I would say, when I was building a buyer's list, I would approach people and say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing. I've done this. And how can I help you? Because anything outside of that, nobody cares. Like, right. I don't care what you're doing. Great. But like, lead with value. I think that's where people mess up. It's like, we always hear about it, but guys, just do it. Like, ask people, how can I help you? But not just how you can help them, actually help them. So if they say, hey, I'm looking for deals in this zip code, blah, 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 blah. What I would do is this, guys. I would say, look, I would approach people and say, hey, my name is Willie Coleman. I've seen you around. You seem like a heavy hitter. I'm in the wholesaling real estate space. What are you looking for? Get what they're looking for. But not just that. I would say, hey, could you tell me what you bought like in the last, 60 days? Like, what actual properties did you buy? The exact properties. I would get the actual addresses. I would take those addresses down and I would go hunting for them, right? When you lead with whatever you're doing in life, lead with adding value and serving the other person. So I would serve that buyer, not in the sense of, hey, I'm working for you, but I'm working to find exactly what you're looking for in my business, and I'll provide the opportunity to you. And most buyers, especially like in a hot market, if one buyer is looking, in a certain zip code, 9 times out of 10, 50 other buyers are as well. So lead with value, and I would go get these deals, go get them, lock them up, and say, hey, got this thing locked up. Do you want it? And it's like, okay, this guy's leading with actual value. He's going to do the work versus a guy. So imagine a guy that asks you those questions. He comes back to you 30 days later and says, hey, I got it. Versus the guy that says, hey, what are you looking for? And hey, can I call you for advice every other day? You just nag them. And it's just like, you have to think how the person, what is the other person's goal? And just go provide that, right? It's not easy, but it's simple.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, I'll say from experience, I've had, obviously, particularly, from 2020 through 2022, there was a new wholesaler, every couple of days in Greenville. And I'm sure they were reaching out to you. They were reaching out to me. And, I'd tell them, well, here's what I'm looking for. And then, they'd send me some Millhouse and Anderson. I'm just like, I never said I wanted Millhouse and Anderson.
Yeah.
Like, don't
did you listen? Yeah, did you listen?
It's not that hard, but at the same time, but what's happening in those situations is the deals are hard to source, and so they're like, well, this is the closest thing I could find. I think is what's going on there.
Sure.
But you've got to put in the real work. I mean, wholesaling, I think, is, in my opinion, the hardest real estate task to do, because you've got to have enough margin for multiple different people, and that's really, really hard to pull off. So I have a lot of respect for the people that do it currently or that got into the business doing that. It's very hard.
Yeah, 100%. If you can figure out how to,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just saying, if you can figure out how to find deals, you can always eat. Because if you can find a good deal, no matter what your strategy is, subject to wholesale, owner finance, wrap, if you can be a good person at sourcing quality deals, you'll be okay in any market, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned some of the disrespect and whatnot on class, race, all those different types of things. One thing I really like, and I don't know if this is unique to Greenville per se, but the Greenville real estate investing scene, I feel like, is very diverse. Men, women, Asians, Hispanics, Russians, black, white, everything. Like, I've run into so many different investors from so many different backgrounds. I just think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Have there been racial challenges that you've run into, or maybe advantages too? I mean, take that in whatever direction you want. What is that like as a black man investing in real estate in South Carolina?
Sure. So when it comes to race, I think I'll put it this way. I think that no matter what you do, we all have disadvantages, right? Whether you're minority, female, you could have a disadvantage as being a white male, right? One could say, depending on which side you're on. And the reality is, it's a game, right? We're playing a game, and I think no matter what disadvantage you have, I think it's important to identify the disadvantage and move accordingly. Because the reality is, we're dealing with people. And like I said, you're not going to be able to change people's mind fundamentally. If somebody's racist or somebody, is prejudiced, like, I'm not going to do a deal because he's a black guy. It's like, okay.
You're lost.
All right. You're lost. On to the next one.
Yeah.
It is a matter of, don't get me wrong, it pisses me off, it teases me off, whatever, to have those encounters. I mean, it definitely happened a ton coming up in terms of, like, just in life. Going in a store and, like, always being watched. I mean, yesterday I was at a store walking around and people were just, like, watching me. I was in the middle of nowhere. It's like, and you just see the eyes. It's like, okay,
that's gotta be unsettling.
Yeah, it's just, and it's honestly just how we live. It
Sure.
is what it is, and it's definitely a long conversation there. But
yeah,
the reality is, it's like, when you understand what's going on, it's like, okay, we understand that some people, for example, in real estate, I'll use examples here. If I call a homeowner, and I say, hey, my name is Willie Coleman, this or the other, sometimes people might not be able to tell my race on the phone, right? They might not be able to tell. But if I actually come out, they're like, okay, yeah, this guy's young, whatever. And, my thing is, in my brain, I can say, oh, they're going to think this, they're going to think that. They've got to make America great again, this and this or the other. And, they got a Confederate flag. And, like, they could possibly be a little prejudiced, maybe, because of all those signs, possibly. And if that's the case, it's like, I could start going to my head all day long, this or the other. Or I could just say, you know what? That's the case. And let me just lead with my knowledge. And let me just lead with facts. And let me just know my shit. Because the reality is, the guy that goes in and doesn't know what he's talking about, or the guy that goes in and can solve a problem, we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with people that are in distress. And I always just said, you know what? I already know I'm starting behind, right? We have to work. And I say we as, whether you're a minority, a female, or whatever your disadvantage is, you could have a disadvantage of not physically being in a location. There's all types of disadvantages. Identify your disadvantage and, perform at your highest level. So to me, I always, was affected, or I felt like I was affected by, again, those things. And it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna become the best. And, it's sad to say, but hopefully that would compensate for any of the other preconceived notions. And the reality is, man, I think I've dealt with some crazy people. I've dealt with a guy. So funny, I cold called him, and or somebody on my team was cold calling him. I called him to get a contract, and he said, there was a tenant living in the property at the time, and he said, yeah, and there's a tenant in there, and he lived there for 5-6 years. He keeps saying he's going to buy it, but he's a black guy, and you know how they are with finance. And he said that while I'm on the phone, right? Wow. And he's talking directly to me, and I said, "Oh, okay." And when in that moment, I could have been like, "Well, hold on now, like I'm a black guy. How dare you? This or the other. This, no. Like I could have rebutted, and I could have been right morally, and this or the other. But the reality is, I said, "Oh, I didn't agree with him. Obviously, I said, oh, okay," and moved on. Ended up, he said that, right? So I understood the possible disadvantage that our team could face with doing this deal.
Yep.
So what did I do? I moved accordingly. I ended up doing it all virtually. So I sent him a contract virtually. Ended up telling my attorney the situation of what he told me. So we ended up closing at 2 separate times. So he went inside his paperwork. I went inside my paperwork. Bought his house. And guess what? This black guy ended up creating $150,000 in equity, but we don't know what we're doing with our money. So the reality is,
so you turn that into your advantage.
Exactly. It's like, okay, awesome. All right, you've already told somebody has.
He showed his hand a little bit.
Show me your hand. So it's like, identify that. Let's get that out of the way immediately.
I said you were a ruthless negotiator. I wasn't joking. You're like a poker player over here.
Dude. So it's like, you can get mad at your disadvantage, or you can understand your disadvantage and move accordingly. Again, so other scenarios is sometimes you can't always do things virtually. You go out to the property, they say, "Oh, I don't want to sell it to you," or they typically, again, racism or prejudice, it's not always done directly, said or directly, whatever. But things happen. It's like, okay, I didn't get that deal. Why didn't I get that deal? It wasn't logic. It didn't make sense. I mean, I've had things even on our construction side. I'm getting into new build construction now, and I've had a framer tell me, he told me, he said, and I'm not going to give out names here or anything, but there's somebody locally that probably is just probably a little intimidated by my age or race, whatever they are intimidated by, or that I'm just doing cool, dope stuff. And they told this gentleman, he does a lot of framing for them or whatever. And they told him, they said, if I would have known you were doing that property for Willie Coleman, I would have paid you. And it was thousands of dollars. They said, we would pay you, I think it was like $5,000-$10,000 to not do the job for me.
Wow.
Just so they wouldn't do it for me, right? And that's things that happens behind the scenes, right? And it's wild. Like, it's just crazy, man. It's like you can't even make this stuff up. And it's like, that type of stuff, it's never not going to happen. People are always going to have their preconceived notions. And you just got to understand it happens. But guess what? It is what it is. We got to keep moving. Yep. Don't let it hold you back. Quit using it as an excuse. Because the reality is, again, that guy could have said that. I could have responded to him and, oh, I didn't get the deal. Oh, I'm mad. Oh, and I could say, Stan, it's so much easier for you. Or I could say, okay, yeah, black people don't know how to deal with their money. Bet. like it's like, so, so I just use it. And on the other side, right, you get people that, you go to them and they're so happy. They're like, oh my God, the youth is coming in, you're minority. Like, yeah, let me do the deal with you versus doing it with, traditional
crusty investor. Yeah.
It's like they like the new blood, they like the minority side, right? So that does happen too, right?
For sure.
But unfortunately, I wish that happened more times. Usually we are a little bit, or you submit an offer and it's like, I know that was the best offer, and it's like we just never heard back. So it's gonna happen. Yeah. But like I said, the reality is you just got to keep moving, understand it is, and adapt accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess the one positive about real estate in this discussion is that I can't think of maybe the stock market to a certain extent, trading maybe to a certain extent, but there's not too many businesses that are more free market and just focused on money over everything else than real estate, right? Like if you bring people a good deal and they turn it down because of all of these peripheral things, they're just losing money. They're just not helping themselves. And most real estate investors are honestly too greedy to do that. They might be prejudiced or biased or whatever, but money is going to trump that, to use I hate to use that word in this discussion,
Yeah.
but money is gonna win out at the end of the day. But yeah, that thank you for that. I was really curious. We've talked a little bit about that on the side, but I was really
Sure.
curious to hear a little bit more. So thank you for sharing that. Um,
Absolutely.
so you're Gen Z, right? You would be
Hmm.
you'd be considered Gen Z. Do you, and I don't want to go too much longer here because this has been a great discussion, and we're both busy. I've got a ton of notes, and I'm not going to get through all of these.
No
Um,
worries.
but as far as Gen Z goes, do you feel like your generation views real estate differently than previous generations did, or not so much?
Oh, absolutely. Completely different. I think the idea of home ownership kind of it's not necessarily the American dream anymore. I don't think it is the top of everybody's to-do list by any means. I think that's one thing in terms of the traditional side. Why that's the case, I haven't done enough research to give an educated answer on that. My thing is just like, from my perspective of being a Gen Z, is like, well, people always have to live somewhere. It doesn't matter what's going on in the economy. You have to lay your head down somewhere, whether that's an apartment building, multifamily, duplex, single family home, whatever. And so my thing is like, well, they might not want Gen Z or whatever. They might not be buying real estate. But they're always going to have to live in real estate. So from my perspective, it's like that belief is kind of ignorant to a certain extent. I do kind of see the understanding of it. Like, even from my perspective, I don't necessarily own a house that I live in. I actually, well, I do some creative stuff with our companies, and I actually rent a house that our company owns, but I don't personally own a house, because the reality is, personally own a house, one could actually argue it does not make much sense from
Sure.
a financial liability, or not liability, but just it's a responsibility. You got to keep up the grass, you got to keep up the roof. There is maintenance to maintenance you have to keep up with. So I do get it, but from the perspective of an investment, all day long, it just makes sense to own real estate. Depreciation, not having to really end up paying taxes or whatever. So I think people from a investment standpoint should probably change their mindset a little bit. But yeah, I definitely, just from even dealing with buyers and renting to the Gen Z world, just hearing their mindset, it's completely different dealing with whether it's a baby boomer or even millennials, right? They're still on the concept of owning. So it's very interesting. The new generation, as the next 10, 15 years evolve, we're going to definitely be seeing interesting market, I think, with the new generation.
Yeah, that will be interesting. I wonder how much of that is just affordability, because like homeownership being the American dream, I think a lot of it was we've got these government loan programs that kind of subsidize real estate and make it, affordable for people who
Mm-hmm.
otherwise would not be able to purchase a home. But now the average first time home buyer is 36 years old, which is the highest ever. And so
Wow.
I wonder how much that contributes to what you're saying. I would imagine quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So changing gears a little bit here, I know that your business is separate from your parents and has been kind of. I mean, would you say it's always been separate from your parents?
Yeah, yeah. So literally since the day I started our company, I started separate. Although my parents have been an amazing guide, in terms of, life advice and, you know, dealing with people. I've never like worked to where, my mom's never been working and cold calling, and like she never worked in the wholesale business, or my dad, or anything like that. Again, I'm big on like partnerships. So like, I've sold them deals. I've even partnered with them as I started buying properties. I partnered with them, right? Might as well keep it in the family because it just makes sense. But yeah, like I've built my own company. So again, I used to cold call. I started hiring virtual assistants. So I built a virtual assistant team. We've got 10 cold callers that are all over the world. We've got people in Colombia and the Philippines just cold calling and sending texts. That's all they do all day is find the next deal. On the local scale, I've hired an operations assistant to help me, with, at this point, I don't think I got too far into it, but, again, I started as a wholesaler, which was great because I was able to identify deals And then I started buying properties. So at 17 years old, I started buying rental properties. I built up a rental portfolio. Then I got into short-term rentals back in 2020. Everybody and their mama probably did. And I hopped on the bandwagon, frankly. I started doing short-term rentals like Airbnb, VRBO, stuff like that. And now I've transitioned into the luxury real estate side of things. So, for example, like I'm currently doing a property where I raised $1.5 million. We tore down a single-family house, and we're just trying to do real estate, but lead with perfection versus profit. You know, a lot of times in our business, people are leading with, the profit margin. So I can't use that stove because that's going to take us over budget. So anyway, I've kind of changed my model a little bit in the past year to really do more fulfilling projects and doing projects that I actually really, really am passionate about, and unique properties, things that, you know, we are in a market where I believe is huge opportunities. I mean, we're well into our growth, but we got a long way to go in Greenville. And I want to be the start of creating real estate that is not what you see every day. You know, I'm doing houses where we're putting elevators, we're putting theater rooms, we're providing smart homes where every room has a speaker. And, you know, there's just, you know, I took a trip to Europe a couple months back, and I said, you know what? You know, everything in Europe, you know, is very, you know, every country has things ahead and behind, of course, but things like, you know, sleek lines and clean and just doing things, simplifying things. So that's really what I'm bringing to Greenville right now is, you know, a lot of LA inspiration and European inspiration. I'm bringing that to Greenville because I believe that the reality is that's what's missing. And I want to solve a problem for people that want to be in Greenville, but, you know, they also want to have notes of other part of the globe, not just your standard traditional, whether that's the farmhouse modern or whether that's the craftsman. You know, that's kind of an everyday flip. And it's like, you know what? How do we switch that up a little bit? So that's my next side. And I say all to say, you know, I built a team and I'm building a team actively. Again, I just got a lady in operations to help us really put all this together. I don't go and hire builders. I'm very OCD about everything we do. So whether that's, you know, picking light fixtures out or, you know, whether that's the cabinetry, whatever, leading with a more artistic, creative side of things versus thinking about profit. So to do that, I can't really do the $200,000-$300,000 house anymore. So I'm only really doing high margin, big deals. Like I said, I just raised 1.5 to do a new construction property, to do some of this stuff to make this vision come to life. And so definitely we're at a pivotal point in our business, and it's definitely an interesting time with, you know, the market and interest rates and things like that. And so I just said, you know what? Let me just give us a God and say, you know what? I want to be creative, and God let all the numbers and things like that, the market, it all work out at the end. You know, I've always done flips that way. I've never thought about, like, for example, I went into an area in Greenville where I would create comps. And the way I did that was I bought, for example, in like the West Side, I bought 4 houses at one time. I renovated all of them, and then I put 2 in the market. So I was able to sell 2, and then it made it easier to refinance 2. You know, so there's things that, you know, people always say, well, you can't do whatever the market says. You can't outdo the market. It's like, well, we ever thought about somebody starts a market, somebody sets a bar. So let's just keep raising the bar.
Yeah, the market is just people.
It's just people. It's literally money's not real. Like, it's just like, it's all made up. It's all what we decide it is.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? Let's just move a different way. So anyway,
and the good thing for you as far as that strategy goes is like the part of the market that's the most insulated from all of these interest rate increases, whatnot, is the luxury market.
Yeah. The reality is, you know, one could say you're serving the rich right now. I hate to say it that way. It might be true. I'm serving the clientele that they don't care about interest rates. They don't care about. They want what they want. You know, it's like, the house is elevator. The house. Yeah, I want it. You know, I'll pay cash for it. It's like, there we go. Who gives a shit about interest rates? That's just the reality.
Yeah, for sure. So if there's someone listening that they would like, they're in real estate or maybe another business, they want their kids to get involved in it, maybe as a family business, maybe not, maybe kind of the model that you did where you learned from your family but then ultimately did your own thing. What advice would you give?
Yeah.
to those parents?
Mm-hmm. Tough one. I think this. I think that at the end of the day, we all have you know things that we want. I'm not a parent yet, so I can't speak from the parent perspective as much.
Yeah,
But I
from the
do
child
know,
perspective.
yeah, from the child perspective, I feel like the the child has to want whatever they're doing.
And
They have to
and just to
have
be clear, I'm asking you this question because I think a lot of parents desire that, but I think a lot of children don't. So that's why I'm
exactly.
asking. That's why I'm asking you that.
Exactly. I think parents need to, every situation is different. Everybody grew up in a different way, right? People go through childhood, trauma, right? Or they go through a struggle in their life that might say, you know what, I'm going to be a hustler because I don't ever want to have the challenge again, or whatever that might be. I think, at the end of the day, people have to find themselves in a way, right? They have to figure out what they're passionate about, but not even figuring out what you're passionate about, because I believe, one, maybe it should even do what they're not passionate about to fill, to give them the resources to go do what they're passionate about.
Sure.
And I think, look, little Johnny, if you want to go, become a, architect, well, to become an architect, keep that in your mind. You want to be an architect. You want to end up going to Clemson or whatever. Great. Well, to get there, the parent might need to give them a little tough love, right? It's not a free ride, right? I don't think you can really teach hustle and drive. You can't really teach that. It has to come from within. And so I would say it's sometimes, the best lesson is, hey, look, you don't have an allowance. You got to go figure it out. So that might be, go have them become a landscaper, go have them, go do the dishes, go, work the neighborhood, whatever that might be, but kind of you have to create that drive in them. So honestly, that's my goal. As I look at it today, that might change tomorrow as a parent. My intention, obviously, my kid will have every resource and they could think of anything. But the reality is, my intent really is to get them to be driven. And so whatever they want, they're gonna have to work for it. It's just that simple. It's like, hey, you wanna, go to your summer camp? Well, it costs $500. All right, well, you're gonna get in my truck and we're gonna go do real estate. You might hate it. That's okay. You might hate it, you might fall in love with it, whatever, but whichever side you land on, either way, it's going to drive you to say, I hate this and I never want to, be in the car with my dad again to look at houses. Okay, great. Well, now you know what you don't want.
Yeah.
So go work for what you do want, So
find
I
another
think
way to make $500.
Exactly. I think it's got to come within their drive. At the end of the day, they've got to want it. You cannot, people watch interviews with me all the time, or, I meet with people and they're like, man, I just wish my kid, da, da, da. It's like, and they say, would you be able to talk to them? I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm just going to tell them like, hey, what do you want? And they're like, well, I just want to go play Call of Duty. I'm like, okay, well, do you want anything else? Do you want to go to California? Like, and they're like, oh yeah, I would love to do that. But yeah, my parents, they'll pay for it. I'm like, well, what if they don't? What would you do? And so it's like, you got to kind of find what what's in it for them, and really start there. Not just, little Johnny, you're going to do this. You're going to be like Willie. It's like, no, they're not going to do that. Again, for me, it was like, I felt like I didn't love everything I did, but God was giving me that talent. And I said, you know what? I don't want to take the traditional path. So I'm driven by not going the traditional path. And that's, again, what drove me to be great at, the entrepreneur side of business and stuff like that. But again, that's not taught. It's more discovered, and the person's got to want it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot more that I've had written down that I wanted to discuss, but this has been a great conversation. Right? Yeah, I'm gonna have to call this because I told you right before I got a contract right before we went on the show. I've got to review that. I'm sure you're actually, for those that are watching it, you're actually in one of your Airbnb properties, right? Currently?
I am. Yep.
All right, so that's awesome.
In one of our Airbnbs. Yeah.
So we're gonna have to do a part 2 at some point. Probably not this year, but maybe next year at some point, and talk about your Airbnb business, because I think that'll be really interesting. But I want to close with this one question: if you could go back to your 15-year-old self with the knowledge you have now about real estate, what would be one thing that you would want to tell your 15-year-old self about real estate?
Don't second guess. Go for your gut. I think a lot of times as 15, or when I was starting at 15, it was like, oh, what about this? Well, they're gonna think this, they're gonna think that. It's like, dude, just do it.
Just do it.
Move with a sense of urgency. I think America has a problem in general. I mean, you go out to a fast food restaurant, you go out to a restaurant, people are not moving with a sense of urgency. I'm not even talking about being motivated by money or what. I'm just saying, like, take over your feet and do the work. It's like, and once you start doing it, stop second guessing yourself. It's like, even if you're doing it and you're doing it wrong, well, fail fast, fail forward. I don't believe in the idea of failing. I just think we fall forward because whatever we do, we're just learning and we just keep learning. So
you're learning how to do it better.
Exactly. Move quick. And that's how, when you start moving, even if you're not doing the right thing, you start building momentum. Like, again, as you start putting stuff out, momentum starts. So I tell myself, stop second guessing and move quick. I wouldn't change anything. Go, oh, what I made mistakes. Of course, yeah. I've lost deals, lost earnest money. I mean, I probably, lost a ton of money. Great. It's like, great. Lose faster. Fail fast and fail forward and move with a sense of urgency.
That's awesome. Great advice. Willie, thank you so much for your time. This has been really enjoyable for me. I always enjoy talking to you just in general.
Yes,
but I think that this will translate well for the audience. I think they'll enjoy it. It's probably going to, I'm probably going to run this at end of October, maybe early November. We're recording this October 16th. I'm out of town during that period of time, so that'll be a good time to run it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I really appreciate it. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they find you?
Yeah, man. If you want to get a hold of me, guys, find me on Instagram. It's at willie.coleman on Instagram. And just shoot me a DM. Would love to connect with you on however I can help, whether that's doing a deal with you or just pointing you in the right direction of who can help. Hit me up.
And that's Willie, WILLIE .Coleman.
Correct.
All right. Perfect.
Yes, sir.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Willie. Thank you to
Sam.
everyone watching or listening. Again, you can find all of my contact information in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs. Please support the show by liking, subscribing, rating, reviewing, and we will talk again next time.